Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 77 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, those numbers 77, of course, have a very significant reference to tragedy in the UK. And unfortunately, they have a similar connotation with tonight's show. Now, regular viewers will remember that last week we were hoping to hook up with David Balin, the president of the Porter's Ranch Resident Association. And of course, Porter's Ranch is the community that is being devastated by the methane gas leak from the gas caverns beneath their community. Now, last week I made the observation that the mainstream media were not reporting on this issue in the UK. Well, I'm not suggesting for one moment that anybody from the BBC actually watches Fracking Nightmare, but a couple of days after I made that observation, this article appeared on the BBC website. Now, as I don't watch mainstream TV, I have no idea whether it actually was broadcast or simply was online. But nonetheless, this is directly from their website. It was published on the 7th of January. California state of emergency over methane leak. And the article comments, residents have been complaining of nausea, headaches and other symptoms, but the utility company says that scientists agree natural gas is not toxic and that its odorant is harmless at the minute levels at which it is added to natural gas. Health officials in the area have said that long-term effects of being exposed to the gases are unknown. Clearly not doing their research in other areas of the world that have experienced long-term exposure to methane. The utility company is providing temporary accommodation or funds for the displaced residents and several thousand people in Porter Ranch who have been relocated while the gas continues to leak and repairs take place. So according to CBS News, only 2,200 families have been relocated, even though 6,500 have applied for help. And here's a quote from Paula Crasium, the president of the Porter Ranch Neighborhood Council. She says, you have kids going to school outside their neighborhoods, families that are living in hotels. The longer this goes on, the more stress there is. Well, unfortunately, David Balin wasn't able to join us again this evening because he's meeting with one of California's senators at the well site. But I'm delighted to say that at the very last minute, Susan Gorman-Chang has agreed to join us, and unfortunately not via Skype, but on the phone. But Susan, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Well, Susan, thank you so much for stepping into the breach at the last minute. And let me just say that our thoughts are with you. Those of us that have done our research and have been out into environments that have been affected by methane exposure know very well what you're going through. And our thoughts are with you at this very, very difficult time. But you heard the comment that was published on the BBC there, that where SoCal have said, their spokesman has said, scientists agree natural gas is not toxic and that its odorant is harmless at the minute levels at which it is added to natural gas. But what is your experience, first-hand experience of Porter's Ranch?
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for interviewing me and getting our story out. I mean, it's really been key in getting this out to the world and to our, elected officials. So, no, it's not harmless. It is a chemical, methane, and also they tried to key in on the methyl mercaptan, which is the odorant that they add to natural gas. And they kept saying, oh, it's for your safety, so you can smell it, Well, what it was designed to do was, if you have a gas leak in your house, you smell it, you get the heck out of there, and you call, help, and you get the leak fixed. It's certainly not designed to be smelled 24/7 for months on end by the residents of my community, which it has been. And so it started October 23rd. It was October 24th. It was absolutely nauseating and overwhelming. And we were calling, and they denied it. They denied there was a leak. SoCal Gas did. We called the AQMD, which is the Air Quality Management District, and they came out and took some samples. But anyway, to answer your question, yes, it's given me and my husband We have a son also, but my husband and I specifically have gotten headaches. I've gotten dizzy and nausea. I was an avid jogger, and I had to stop that because that was inhaling it deeply was, absolutely the worst thing. And it started October 23rd, and November 22nd, we evacuated because the Los Angeles County Department of Health mandated that SoCal Gas would pay for our relocation. So we were in a hotel for a while, and last Wednesday we moved into a rental house about 10 miles south of Porter Ranch.
So it's reported that 2,200 families have been relocated, and there's another 6,500 waiting to be evacuated. So how are the families that are being evacuated being selected?
It's been very haphazard. I mean, I called the number. It was a Thursday, a week before Thanksgiving, that Los Angeles County Health Department issued that edict. They didn't really get it out to people. I'm with St. Porter Ranch, a nonprofit that we're forming, and I tried to get out the information the best I could, but it's almost like a first come, first serve, and it's very haphazard. SoCal Gas has a few contractors they're working with, but most of them are on the East Coast, like out of New York, so they're not familiar with their area. They're not familiar with how far some of these places are they're trying to place us when people have kids they've got to get to school and work they've got to commute to. It's been very haphazard and very disorganized. We were lucky to get out when we did and lucky to get a house that we did, but it's not being done very efficiently or very fairly.
So you've obviously moved into a house. A lot of people have had to move into hotel rooms. Now, I lived in the US for a number of years, and I know that when there is shall I say, a change in market forces, the economy responds accordingly. So are you experiencing this, that house rental prices are increasing significantly because there is the knowledge that SoCal are picking up the tab?
I think it is, yeah. In fact, the house we're renting, I think, is going for a lot more than it would normally go for under regular market conditions. So they're going to have to sort all of that out. But there's only so many rental houses and hotels or apartments in Los Angeles. It's a very expensive market. It's a tight market.
And I guess, obviously the other problem is schooling. And in fact, an exchange I had with David Balin earlier today, he told me that his daughters were starting at their new relocation school. Unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity to explore what that meant. But I'm assuming that temporary schooling facilities have been established for the displaced residents.
Yes, there are 2 elementary schools in our area. My son went to one. He's now in college. And they were evacuating us, and those kids were still going to that school, going out and playing at recess. And SoCal Gas did not tell them about the gas leak. It happened on a Friday. I actually, as a private citizen, called both elementary schools and emailed them on the Monday to tell them about the gas leak. They were totally unaware of it, which is, unconscionable that SoCal Gas didn't tell them about the leak. And so, yes, they have, after a lot of, discussion and a lot of protests on our part, literal protests, where we got the moms and the dads and the kids out there protesting, they have relocated those kids. They're coming back to school, I believe, tomorrow or Wednesday, and they're just sort of fitting them into one's going to an elementary school and another group is going to a middle school, fit them in wherever they can further away from that leak.
And I've heard in fact, I've read reports now that the nosebleeds have started. And earlier last year, in April of last year, I released a documentary called Voices from the Gas Fields, where I'd spent some time with families in southern Queensland, living amongst the very heavily fracked gas fields of that area. And one of the common denominators of people who were exposed over significant periods of time to relatively low levels of methane toxicity, but was nosebleeds. And followed by other discomfort like nausea and headaches. And have these symptoms now started to manifest amongst the residents of Porter's Ranch?
Oh yes, absolutely. Myself again, the headaches, the nausea, and the dizziness. My neighbor, Kyoko, has had several nosebleeds, and a lot of the kids have had nosebleeds at the schools, and that's been documented. And pets, I also want to say, pets are lower to the ground and, have smaller lungs. And we've had cats with nosebleeds. We've had dogs having seizures. We've had dogs throwing up. So it's been, for us hard to ignore, but SoCal Gas is doing its best to sort of whitewash all of this. But, the more information, the more shows like this we can get on and get the word out is what we have to do.
Absolutely. I don't. Please don't take this as a negative. But we have been trying. I know everybody's under a lot of pressure in Porter's Ranch right now, but we have been trying for 2 weeks to get somebody from Porter's Ranch to give us a first-hand account, and it hasn't been easy. And so, just one observation just may be that the community could establish a press office, or have part of the community accept a responsibility for dealing with press inquiries, because you are absolutely right. I mean, this information needs to get out. SoCal will adopt the normal practice of any of these extractive industries, which is doing everything they can to deny, deceive, to obfuscate, claim that it's being exaggerated. It's only 5 years ago, of course, or nearly 6 years now, since the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster, and the magnitude of the lies and deceit that was perpetrated by, pretty much everybody from the chief executive officer down during the course of that disaster is, just incredible. I mean, it is bordering on being sociopathic. Yes, it is criminal, absolutely.
Yes. And I do want to say something else, another complication. I don't know if you have this in England, but we have so many regulators here. We have AQMD, which is in charge of the air. We have DOGGR, Division of Geothermal, which is in charge of anything going on below the surface. And then we have the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission. And they all have a piece of it, and they all keep, they're finally starting to get together. But for a while, that was the other game. It was the regulators have been so underfunded that the SoCal Gas just really has its way with whatever goes on, because no one's going to check them. I put in a written complaint to the California Public Utilities Commission as soon as this leak started, with all of our health effects and everything that was going on. And I got a letter back to them and basically quoted SoCal Gas. Our regulator, who is supposed to be regulating this industry, sent me a form letter back that said SoCal Gas says there's no health consequences. SoCal Gas says they're doing everything to stop the leak. That was a regulator's response. That is pathetic. And that is what's going on. I think some of the regulators are basically in the pockets of these fossil fuel companies.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, it's revolving doors. And in a lot of cases, those people who go into the regulators' roles were effectively nominated by the industry because they wanted a safe pair of hands in that job. And if anybody does challenge them, then they just make sure that they're removed. And sadly, that is the case, the world over. Now, Susan, also with us online are some representatives of a community from the Fylde Peninsula, which is in the north of England. And this community has actually been fighting to resist having gas caverns established beneath their community for, I think, about 14 years. But last year, because the local authority rejected an application by an unconventional gas company to establish a fracking operation, the reaction of the British government was to, in a fit of pique, approve these gas caverns that, like I said, had been blocked for 14 years. Now, these people, I can see them. They're sitting in the living room, I think, of Claire. and they've been listening intently to what you've said. So let me go over to Claire. Claire, Susan can hear you. What is your reaction to what you've just heard?
Well, obviously, we're horrified hearing about the terrible situation that's happening at Porter's Ranch. And first of all, our deepest sympathies for the situation that residents find themselves in. We're in a position here where we've been trying to fight underground gas storage for 14 years. And as Ian said, they've only just passed it. The community's in shock. We don't understand why they've passed it. 19 gas stations. And there's been, all through the planning process, there's been concerns about the geology, the safety, the health and safety plan. We don't understand why it's passed, and our local community is really against it. And what struck me about what you said sounds really concerning, but also that we would think that regulators and people would be able to monitor this kind of facility, because that's what people are saying to us, that, oh, it's safe, there's no problems with underground gas storage. Obviously, your example showing us that there are extreme concerns. In your situation, the regulator wasn't able to do anything, they failed you because has only done what's been mandated to do.
Well, now, Claire, I hate to say this, but obviously, this must be almost a godsend for you, because what you have here at Porter's Ranch is prima facie evidence of what can occur, and basically how ill-prepared the industry is in dealing with this problem. I mean, coupled with which, I made a mistake last week. Because of something that I had read, I suggested that the breach in the well was at a deep level. I think I made the observation that it was around about 8,000 feet. It's actually at a relatively shallow level. I think it's actually at around about 300-400 feet or so. But nonetheless, what I'd said about SoCal getting funding from the state to carry out repairs to the subsurface valves was correct, and that remedial work wasn't carried out. And were you aware of that, Susan, by the way?
Oh, yes. Well, that came out, yeah, that there was a safety valve, and they couldn't find replacement parts for it, so they actually took the safety valve out of the well that, blew. I mean, the term safety valve, how could anyone take that out? And then SoCal Gas made a statement that said the Division of Geothermal doesn't require safety valves. And I just wanted to scream. Everybody's pointing fingers at everybody else. I mean, it's like, the SoCal Gas says, well, we've complied with this, this, and this, and the regulators, it's criminal. That you would take a safety valve off of a well, and it's criminal that the regulator would have been okay with that had they known. I don't even think they knew. But this is how lax the laws have gotten, or were to begin with, and how really the regulators are just in the pockets of SoCal Gas and all the oil and gas industry.
Absolutely,
there really is there's no protection. There's no protection, and I think the only reason this all came out was because it's such a horrific environmental disaster that we got the politicians' attention. Governor Brown finally declared a state of emergency, and so we're getting a lot of eyes on it. But we're going to have to continue to pressure on and on and on until we find till my ultimate solution is shut this down. It's old, it's decrepit, it's unrepairable. They've let it gone beyond the level of repair, and we really need to shut it down. Some of those wells are, 60, 70, 80 years old. That's insane.
Well, I mean, of course, the whole storage facility here is effectively a depleted oil reservoir, and the cavity, the cavity that is caused as a result of the abstraction has been, filled with the gas. And I mean, now this is only my conjecture, but there is such a phenomenal glut of hydrocarbons at the moment. I mean, there is well over 1 year's supply in storage around the world, and it wouldn't surprise me if the problem was caused by an attempt to overpressurize the caverns. And so you can just see how this was a disaster waiting to happen, because not only have they removed the safety valves, they then overpressurize. So, whatever protection they have got in there, basically just can't handle the increased pressure. And I know that, I've seen some of the comments from well blowout specialists who have said they've never seen anything like this before. And I've actually heard a comment from a guy in the gas industry who said that, this was a new challenge, and they weren't yet sure how they were going to deal with it. And what is even more staggering, of course, is that SoCal didn't even acknowledge this, I think, for close on about 6 weeks.
Yes, it was just incredible. I mean, hello?
Hello, yes, we can still hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, they denied it. When we smelled it, the odorant, they said, no, we're just doing normal maintenance and venting. It went on and on and on. And at every turn, they've only done what they've been forced to do as far as relocate us. They were forced to do that by LA County Health. They wanted to take the odorant out. They wanted to spray some other chemical that would cover up the odor of the methylmercaptan, and luckily the AQMD said no, because it's like, my gosh, another chemical, really? I mean, you think this is all just about a bad smell? That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, oh, it's just a bad smell. It won't hurt you. It's just sickening.
Well, Susan, this is the mentality that prevails in this industry, and it's almost 6 years since the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster, and BP lawyers looked at the legislation and came to the realization that their potential liability for reparations was going to be calculated on the size of the visible slick. So their lawyers said, well, how can we make the slick invisible? And so they got their chemists involved, and they came up with the solution of using one of the most toxic chemicals known to man, Corexit, and poured literally millions of gallons of Corexit onto the slick, which had the effect of sinking the slick, so taking it out of sight, which has had the benefit, I use the term obviously somewhat sarcastically, of sinking the slick, but actually diluting it. So it's actually made the sub-sea slick even greater than the original surface slick, which ultimately could have been cleaned up. But what it's done is now created a dead zone in the Gulf. And because of my background in the oil industry, I was doing a lot of analysis of what had occurred, and I actually produced a video presentation where I identified the two individuals on the rig who, in my opinion, were basically guilty of either gross incompetence, negligence, or something much worse. And I regret to say that although I and others were on the case for 5.5 years, those two individuals, and I'm referring to Bob Kaluza and David Vadrine, were actually finally discharged of any responsibility in December of last year. So literally less than 1 month ago, after 5.5 years, the two individuals who, in my opinion, had a lot of questions that needed to be answered were finally let off the hook. So despite the fact that 11 people died in that disaster, no individual has been called to account. And this is my counsel to the residents community is this is the way corporations work. They try to literally corral everybody inside the corporate logo. And I'm actually just going to put the corporate logo up on the screen here so that people know who the responsible party is. This is SoCal Gas, Southern California Gas. But
the parent company is Sempra.
Exactly. The parent company is indeed Sempra Energy. And so my counsel to the community is to try to identify the individuals who were responsible. There's the individuals at the sharp end, i.e. those who took the decision, not to put in the safety valve or not to repair the safety valve. And then, of course, the managers, senior managers and the executives in the chain of command. Because once you make it personal, once you identify the individual, then you will start to see the gas company really go into panic. Whilst they think they can keep everybody safe behind the corporate logo, then they will literally just try and dismiss and deceive and obfuscate for as long as they possibly can. And BP got away with it, have got away with it for nearly 6 years.
Oh boy, yeah, we got a long road ahead of us. But I mean, at least a lot of it is out in the open. We still have a long way to go, and it really is. You really feel like it's a David and Goliath story. I tell you.
Well, and
we're up against so many.
Well, you are, but I mean, there's how many residences in Porter's Ranch?
30,000.
30,000.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well,
about 8,000 some homes. About 8,000 some homes, but 30,000 individual residents.
Okay, 8,000 homes. 8,000 homes. Now, this is one big community, and there's going to be a lot of interest here because it's really important that the community works together. And let me tell you, the industry will try to infiltrate the local community. They will try and cause division within the local community. And it's really important that the community tries to stay strong here. But, the biggest impact on the community is going to be the impact on property prices. Because this is, yes. I mean, I was looking at the property website for Borders Ranch, and it looks to me, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the average property value is something in the region of about $500,000.
Yes.
Is that about right? No. So that's $500,000. So, what's going to happen here is that because of this, it's going to be very, very difficult for people to realize that value if they try and sell, because obviously the reputation of Porter's Ranch has now been damaged by SoCal. And by this gas leak. So, the community, the vast majority of people in that community have a serious financial interest in holding SoCal to account.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. People pay a lot for their houses. They put a lot into their houses. A lot of them depend on, selling it and take some of those funds, move to a smaller house and retire. And absolutely, we know that the prices have already taken a hit based on some realtors and some online analysis. And in fact, anytime, someone read from it has to be disclosed now. If someone sells a house today in Porter Ranch, this gas leak is part of the disclosure. And a lot of realtors are saying people are walking away from that. They read that and go, I don't want to buy here. Even if they, didn't know about it, which is kind of hard, but still some people don't apparently. It's got to be legally disclosed. So, we're taking a big hit on our property values.
Well, Susan, I completely understand how the media works to try and limit the awareness of this. I mean, in the aftermath of the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster, people who lived even 100 miles inland from the Gulf Coast, by June, July, they genuinely believed that it was all done, it was all dusted, because of the way in which the media managed the information flow. If it wasn't for the alternative media, then, basically BP would have been able to, completely, bury it, just like they did the slick.
Yes. Yes, and I agree. Alternative media is very important because we notice that, like in some of the papers, I mean, they would quote SoCal Gas, and that would be the article. It's like, really? I mean, where's the other side? Yeah, so I totally agree with you, and I thank you.
Well, last night I did a radio interview with a Nevada-based radio station. And now this is a radio station. It does broadcasts over FM and online. Now, it's an alternative station. They cover a lot of alternative topics. And, when I mentioned Porter's Ranch, they were gobsmacked. They had no idea. And that's just in the next state.
Right. Yeah. It's insane. It really is.
So let me go back to the community in the northwest of England there. Guys, I mean, you've been listening again to this discussion. I mean, you, in my opinion here, you've been presented with an absolute golden opportunity to raise awareness amongst your community of the, the potential risks here, and all of the assurances that Halite will be giving to your community, I'm sure SoCal were giving to the community in Porter's Ranch when they were establishing the cabins there. So what are your thoughts going forward?
Well, in terms of our local community, it has to be said that there is overwhelming opposition to this scheme anyway, and there has been for the last 14 years. I think I mentioned last week that as part of the planning process, over 10,000 people wrote in to protest about the decision to plan to store gas near our homes within half a mile of where we live. And in fact, there's only 100,000 people in the whole area. So to have 1 in 10 people writing letters is a massive thing. We're really grateful for this opportunity to hear about the first-hand experience of people in California. And we're having a big meeting next week. And so we'll be showing this for a lot of the people who live here, because we have quite a lot of elderly people here who maybe don't have access to the internet and other sources of media to hear about what's happening in California. Obviously, we're very upset about what we're hearing, and we only hope that our government doesn't take the exceptional nature of this tragedy and highlight and try and turn it into, oh, this won't happen here. It won't happen because... Yeah. But we're hearing what you're saying, and we'll definitely make the most of the opportunity that you've given us. And we had one question about your local community. What are your plans now? What are you doing? What do you want to happen? Is your ultimate outcome hopefully that it will be closed down?
Yes, I really, again, it's an old decrepit field that was never really designed for gas storage properly, and we're not even sure it was permitted properly. And so I do ultimately want it shut down. In Southern California, we have a lot of sun. I think I would like to see part of the reparations that SoCal Gas hopefully will have to pay to us is to put solar panels on every roof in Porter Ranch, so that we are less dependent on SoCal Gas to send their gas to our Department of Water and Power, which generates a lot of our electricity. So I would like us to go, mostly solar, which in Southern California you can do. We also have a lot of wind. I would like to see that land turned into maybe a wind farm instead of this dirty gas. And I really do think it needs to be shut down, and even beyond that, made sure that nothing else is going to leak out of there, because there's going to be a lot of old, abandoned wells. So I think there's a lot of work to do, even in shutting it down, but I think it needs to be shut down, and I think we can go to some alternative energy. And that's really what I want to see happen. I think it's the only alternative, because it's too old and decrepit. I don't think you can ever repair it, because if we just repair this well and go on like nothing happened, the next one will blow, and the next one will blow, and in the meantime, we're all being exposed to these toxins, and, we're going to have a cancer cluster. So, yeah, shut it down, and we want to go to alternative energy,
Have they given any indications about, does anybody know what the long-term effects of this will be on your community, on the environment?
No, you know what, they really don't. They keep saying it's safe, but they have no studies to prove that. And I would love to get more information about long-term exposure to methane. That would be wonderful. About Australia, you mentioned. That would be really powerful, and that would help us a lot. Of course, we know that benzene and toluene are two carcinogens, and those are released. Those are also being released, and independent air samples showed those above normal and safe levels. And SoCal Gas does what they call grab samples, and of course, theirs have shown nothing, right? And so we don't, we've been evacuated, but we don't know the long-term effects. So my family and I were there for a month. There's still families up there waiting to be relocated. And the sad thing is, cancer takes 20, 30 years to develop, and there's going to be some bad consequences.
And Susan, I regret to tell you this, but the oil and gas industry has made tremendous effort to shut down research at academic institutions on the long-term effects of exposure to methane. I mean, unfortunately, the oil and gas industry is very, very powerful, like the pharmaceutical industry. And if they catch wind of any university or research facility starting to study something that they believe will be detrimental to their hegemony, then they just go in there with the blank checkbook and effectively get it shut down. I mean, which is exactly what BP were doing when universities around the Gulf Coast were looking to study the effects of exposure to Corexit, and they just bought them off. This is a real problem, and hopefully this will also help people to realise the fact that the US and the much of the English-speaking world is now sliding into a corporatocracy where it's the corporations that call the shots. And I'm sure that you're also familiar with TPP, the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, and TTIP, which is the Atlantic equivalent. And this is a raft of legislation which the corporations are trying to push, which will give the corporations supremacy over all federal and other national law. And absolutely. So it's really important to unfortunately, I mean, it was Raymond Emanuel, and he didn't quite mean it in the same way that I'm going to use it. But he said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." But he meant it in other ways. But we also have to use that same principle and make sure that when we endure something of this order of magnitude, that it's used to not only prevent it happening again, but accelerating the demise of the dependence on hydrocarbons.
Absolutely, that's the ultimate. We're just, and not even to, in global warming, the effect it's having. But we're slowly killing ourselves here, and it's just becoming more and more apparent when we have these big disasters like this. And there's a lot of other gas storage facilities around Los Angeles and around California, and it's just they're all disasters waiting to happen. We just happen to be the first one. Well,
as somebody said to me the other day, if you're on a spaceship and you discovered that there were elements within the crew who were messing with your life support systems, you'd be pretty upset. But that's just the macrocosm of the microcosm of the macrocosm, as it were, because that's exactly what's happening here. There are sociopathic global corporatists that are literally destroying the life support systems of this spaceship. So
of our planet, spaceship Earth, exactly. Yeah.
Indeed. Susan, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I am so sorry that it had to be under these circumstances. But listen, what I would ask is that would you be prepared to join us again next week via Skype so that we can actually have a video link with you rather than just audio? Keep us updated, because this is a situation that has an order of magnitude that very, very few people yet comprehend. The industry and the media are doing their level best to literally sweep it under the proverbial rug. They're applying the metaphorical Corexit to it. But, at least with your agreement, we can help raise awareness, and hopefully other alternative outlets will also pick up on this and get in contact and help get the word out there.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, we all need to get together on this on a worldwide basis. I'd like to keep in contact with the community group there and, the people in Australia. I mean, I think if we all get together, hey, you know what?
Absolutely.
I think we can get something changed. Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet.
They depend on us not getting together. They depend on us staying isolated and just believing whatever BS they throw at us. But I think we're a lot more powerful if we all get together and join, right?
Absolutely. And, out of adversity and all that. So, listen, what I will do, Susan, I will, if you're in agreement, Claire, I will share each other's details with you both.
Okay.
And, you establish the direct contact. And if Susan can contribute in any way to your community meeting next week, then I'm sure she'd be delighted to do so. Yeah. So any final questions or comments, Claire, from your community group?
Just to say thank you, and we really appreciate the contact, and we are having a meeting next week, and we'll make sure we get your message as far and wide as we can, and our thoughts are with you. We hope you get it closed down.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for all of your efforts and what you're doing there. We all got to stick together on this, you know? So
well, Susan, I know you put in a tremendous amount of effort to join us this evening. You know, we were hoping it was going to be video. That didn't work out, but it's been a tremendous first contact, as it were. And to say, hopefully, you know, by next Monday, we can get the Skype issues resolved, and you can join us on a video link.
Definitely. All right. Thank you so much.
Susan, please send our best wishes and our regards and our thoughts to your community. And, you know, if there is anything in any way, shape or form that we can do or you think we can do to help, then please don't hesitate to contact us.
Okay. Thank you. You have a nice
Thanks,
evening.
Susan. Have a great day, and we'll speak next week. Bye now. Goodbye. Well, yeah. One page on the BBC website, and of course they think that's reporting. The only reason that we heard about the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster so extensively was because it was a British company. And of course the Chief Executive Officer, Tony Hayward, proved that he was way out of his depth in every way, shape and form. But this is SoCal. No one's ever heard of SoCal unless you live in Southern California. So it's pretty easy to bury, but this is an ecological disaster of an order of magnitude of the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster, but this is directly affecting the community at Porter's Ranch. 8,000 homes, 30,000 residents, and right now they're living in a fracking nightmare. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be hooking up with the Upton Community Protection Camp, who are trying to ensure that our friends at iGas don't get their bits in the ground.
The Alternative View Conference. The AV6 DVD collection. Enjoy 13 fantastic presentations on 12 discs from some of the best researchers in their fields.
What a weekend, hey? What a weekend, like what a range of speakers, what a hard bunch of acts to follow, really. I've heard some of the most important information here today, really, because honestly, I've spoken at a lot of gigs, and I'd say this is the best gig that I've spoken at.
These unique presentations are essential viewing for all those who have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and who are now ready to participate in bringing about the changes that we all know we need to see. AV6. 12 discs in 2 volumes. Order now from ukcolumn.org. AV Events, taking positive activism to the next level.
And welcome back to part 2 of Fracking Nightmare. Now that was a long part 1, but I didn't want to break the connection with Susan Gorman-Chang, speaking to us directly from Porter's Ranch in Southern California on the outskirts of LA, and the nightmare that community are experiencing as a result of this phenomenal methane leak from the gas storage caverns beneath their community. And of course, we're also online with the Wire Protection community, that's Wire, W-Y-R-E, from the Filed Peninsula, who hopefully will now be able to use this tragedy to their advantage and prevent the gas caverns from becoming established. So we're from the Filed, we're just going to go a few miles to the south, and I'm now joined by Dr. Stephen Piers, otherwise known as Steve Spy, who is speaking to me from the luxury of his caravan in the Upton Community Protection Camp. Steve, are you there, my friend?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. I can hear you loud and clear. Steve, did you catch that discussion with Susan and Claire?
I did. It's totally shocking what's going on over there. Hopefully, this will bring some awareness to the situation and obviously help the WEIR campaign in stopping the exploitation in that particular area.
I mean, the thing that is staggering is it's the same rhetoric, isn't it? You know, it won't happen because we've got the regulations in place. We've got the regulators to take care of it. I mean, the rhetoric is just trotted out. It's the panacea to shut down the opposition. But then, you know, when the smelly stuff hits the fan, literally in this case, you know, they have no answers.
Well, no, that's all they've got. They've got rhetoric, and we've seen that time and time again. We hear this with iGas. Obviously, we've got the situation here where they've come out with this same old statement, expecting us to just move on and let them drill in this land. Well, we're not going. We've been digging in here. We've been fortifying the position. The importance of this particular site is phenomenal. Within a 1 mile radius, you've got Chester Zoo, right? 12,500 animal species there. Some are endangered. They get their water from boreholes. So if this land's polluted, you're going to kill a lot of these very endangered species at this zoo. And not to mention the 6 schools that are also within the 1 mile radius. It's absolutely atrocious that they think they can get away with it here. Well, we're here to stop them, and we're gonna dig in some more and just stop any kind of drilling for as long as we can. They're going to have to physically drag us off this land.
Well, and the first time that you know, a cat gets a nosebleed, it's probably going to get 20 million shares on Facebook. You know, that's the great tragedy. And yet, you know, when there's a human tragedy like is occurring in Southern California right now, nobody really wants to know, or they play it down, like the BBC statement, you know, which gives more emphasis to the SoCal dismissive response than the reality of the trauma being experienced by the residents. So I agree. I mean, the Upton camp has been there now for, fast approaching 2 years.
Yes, it has, and in that time, we've taken the opportunity to make the place as impenetrable as possible. We've got 4 tower systems. We've got a large tunnel network, and we've got people here, a fantastic group of people that are dug in and ready to hold out, you know, to the bitter end against this absolutely atrocious attempt to poison this land.
Now, iGas actually got the court order to evict the camp. About 6 weeks ago now? 7 weeks ago?
Yes. The court order came into effect on the 4th of December, and obviously since then we've just dug in even more. The High Court are not looking at the big picture here. They're ruling in favour of the corporations. They're saying that these dead entities, these paperwork constructions have human rights, and that's just wrong. Our human rights should be considered above a corporation's human rights.
No, absolutely. And of course, interesting to me was that despite the judge ruling in favour of iGas for the eviction, he didn't award any costs against the named defendants.
It was very interesting. He's hinted at on previous court cases that he would award costs, and obviously you've had some costs awarded against you for the whole Rattling Energies situation. How are you going on with that, Ian?
Oh, listen, I am preparing a very, very interesting rebuttal. And I'm hoping that we'll get a significant number of people coming along to witness the exchanges.
It would be great to come and see it, but I've got a feeling.
No, you guys have to be in situ on the camp there.
We're not going anywhere. We're staying here, so you know. But yeah.
Well, look, you know, the reality is the longer you stay there, and in fact, you know, bear in mind that iGas are not going to get any of the costs back. You know, so they know that whatever this costs, they're going to have to bear. And this is the current iGas stock price. It's almost exactly 2 years since the iGas stock price reached the dizzy heights of £1.60 a share. And that was literally in the early days of the Barton-Moss campaign. So despite the Barton-Moss campaign, the gas price and oil and gas price at the time was rising, and iGas was viewed as a sound investment. And despite my efforts to raise awareness amongst the investment community that this was a zombie stock, and of course I was vilified for making those observations. But here we are 2 years later, and iGas has effectively lost over 90% of its market value in that time. And so it closed trading today at 14.75 pence. Now, in the past, I've made the observation that once iGas stock price dropped below 15 pence, then it may well become a target for the likes of INEOS. But right now, I'm not sure INEOS are going to be that interested in actually paying too much money for it, because now that INEOS have got their own raft of licenses, I mean, I can see that ultimately they might just agree to take the iGas holdings off their hands in lieu of the debt, because iGas reported a loss of £19.3 million in the first half of this year. iGas also made the observation that they had reduced their costs of production from their existing well sites, primarily in the south of England, to $31 a barrel equivalent. Well, the price of oil right now, which is the driver for the gas price, is $31.33. So, basically, you're doing them a favor, Steve, just like, I was doing and the protection community at Crawberry Hill were doing Rathlin a massive favor, because if Rathlin had been able to get on the site when they wanted to get on the site, they would have thrown all that money into running their tests, only to find that that was money literally poured down a black hole, literally and metaphorically, because basically they're never going to be able to generate anything like sufficient revenues to pay off their debts.
Obviously, we're looking at the big picture with iGas. You'll be interested to know that Peel Holdings flew their helicopter over the site a couple of days ago and gave it a jolly good inspection. So we've a feeling that Peel themselves will take an interest in this site and be looking at buying maybe iGas out.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, John Whittaker, of course, is very much a similar animal to Jim Ratcliffe, the chairman of INEOS. And, these are two names that hopefully will become very well known, particularly amongst, the people of the north of England, because a significant chunk of these licenses across the north of England are, of course, iGas. I mean, all of these purple coloured licenses, this is all iGas, and many of these, not all, but many of these in the red here are now INEOS. So INEOS, the new kid on the block, but actually now the most significant player, really, because they're the only company that has effectively the financial wherewithal to exploit even at these very low prices. And of course, over here, this green area, this is Rathlin Energy. And next Monday, we'll be looking at basically a zombie company and the way a zombie company operates. And what's going to be very interesting is in the courts to see, whether effectively the law is upheld or whether the law is manipulated to favour the corporations. But anyway, more of that obviously next week. So how many people, I'm not going to ask that question. I know you've got a lot of people on camp at the moment. But I mean, obviously, as this goes on, you guys have really got to feel that, you're going to be left alone for the duration, because at $33 or not even, $33 a barrel, really, $31 a barrel, it's just not viable for them to take it.
Well, it's not viable. The process itself is not viable. Obviously, you factor in the huge amount of revenue that they're going to get from dumping nuclear waste down the empty boreholes. That must be the big picture that they're looking at. There's quite a few people on site. Obviously, numbers vary from day to day. Over Christmas, obviously people go, other people come. So I think we're down to about 100 people at the moment, but more than enough to hold this land indefinitely and make it a real problem for any bailiffs to get on here. We've had no inkling that bailiffs have even been instructed yet. The police have provided liaison officers, which normally only happens shortly before some sort of activity. So we're on pins, we're ready, we're waiting for it, and everybody is going to be in place to make this an absolutely nightmare field for them to take. It's going to be peaceful, there's going to be no fighting, we're just going to chain ourselves to large objects, and there's going to be people in tunnels, up towers, and the teams that it'll require to shift so many people in so many different positions, I would imagine that would cost a pretty penny.
And I know you have a lot of support from the local community, and that support is increasing exponentially. And hopefully, when people are made aware of the discussion that we've had tonight with Susan, and the continuing discussions we have with her next week, where we're going to have some video footage from the residents of Porter's Ranch, and this information needs to be obviously shared far and wide, and we have to make sure we're using this to shut this down once and for all. Steve, an absolute pleasure to talk with you as always, my friend. I'll be giving you a call during the week. We got a few things that we can be talking about regarding the Rathlin situation. But hey, life ain't boring, is it? Now, I'm going to stay online, Steve, because you may not have seen this. But obviously last week I talked about my experience with Special Branch upon returning from Amsterdam. And despite the excellent article, which was published by Ruth Hayhurst on drillordrop.com, the only media outlet to actually pick up on that article was Russia Today. And last Friday, Russia Today asked me if I would be prepared to do a live interview. And those who know me well know that I will only ever do live interviews. Although, unfortunately, in the subsequent hours, it was edited and pared back. But this is the full version of that interview with Russia Today last Friday. It is up on the Russia Today YouTube channel. And don't be intimidated. This is what the establishment want. They want people to be intimidated by either serving them with bankruptcy orders or threatening them with arrest or getting Special Branch to stop them when they come through airports. But you know what? It only makes us even more determined, and it only shows us how rapidly we are descending into a corporatocracy. So we're going to play out with this interview on Russia Today, and I will see you next week, and we'll be back with Susan Gorman-Chang via video link for an update on what's going on at Porter's Ranch in California.
An anti-fracking campaigner has revealed that he was detained at an airport under the Terrorism Act. Ian Crane was questioned for 2 hours at Exeter Airport just before Christmas. Documents reveal that his mobile phone was examined for approximately 1 hour, and he was told that he could have a friend informed of his detention at public expense, or rather a fried informed at public expense. So what is Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act? Well, it allows police, immigration and customs officers to detain and question people at ports or airports. On request, the person questioned must provide any information or documents, but there is no requirement for an officer to have a reasonable suspicion that someone is involved with terrorism before they are searched. People who fail to cooperate are deemed to have committed a criminal offence. Well, for more on this, I'm now joined by the man himself, Ian Crane, who presents the weekly web broadcast Fracking Nightmare. Ian, good evening. Thanks for joining us. So, are you a terrorist?
Well, I think I'm probably a long, long way removed from being a terrorist, but there's little doubt that David Cameron, despite his claims to never giving up on free speech, I think his interpretation of that is free speech is that as long as it's in line with his views and his philosophy. So I and many other anti-fracking campaigners are certainly regarded as domestic extremists, which is an absurdity.
So you think that is the reason why you're detained. So what exactly then did the security services say to you?
Well, I don't think they knew why they had stopped me. I got the distinct impression that they had been told to stop me, but during the course of the ensuing discussion, it certainly became clear to me that they didn't realise why they'd been told to stop me. So I don't know what story they'd been given, but...
what sort of questions did they ask you, though? I mean, they must have had a line of questioning for you. Were you surprised what they were asking you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, obviously the obvious questions, where had I been, where was I going? And I was, pretty non-cooperative because I told them right from the get-go they certainly did not have any reasonable cause to stop me. And, of course, they advised me that under the Terrorism Act, they didn't need reasonable cause. They could stop me and detain me for up to 6 hours without having any cause whatsoever. So I did tell them, I said, guys, we are this far from being in a corporatist police state in the UK. And unfortunately, you guys, the special branch officers, are helping to facilitate that. And once we actually got talking about the issue of fracking and unconventional gas, I mean, their response was, well, we're all right down here in Devon and Cornwall, which, of course, is certainly not the case for the population in certain other areas of the country, particularly right across the north of England, where David Cameron and the Tory government have effectively unleashed environmental warfare on the population across the central belt of the north of England.
Right, well, you're accusing the government of the curtailment of freedom of speech, but is this actually the first incident of its kind where an activist such as yourself has actually been stopped for no reason at all and even charged under the Terrorist Act?
I doubt it very much. I'm sure that there have been other cases, and I know that Netpol, which is a body that monitors, police behaviour and monitors the police when they overstep the mark. And I'm pretty sure that Netpol have other examples of people suffering even greater levels of harassment. But, I'm very much in the frame. I know that, and our other...
Right, so just finally then, you're in the frame, you're a marked man, as it were. Will this have any impact at all on your future campaigning against fracking?
Oh, it just make me even more determined. And, my emphasis is to encourage people to do their own research and look for themselves. I never ask anyone to take anything I say at face value. Do your own research and come to your own determination. And I can absolutely assure everybody that there is not a single member of the anti-fracking community that would deserve the label of being a terrorist.
Or not engage in any violent acts at all in terms of demonstrating?
Absolutely not. The whole ethos of the anti-fracking community, which covers all spectrum, or the full spectrum of the community, and the absolute ethos is that this is about non-violent, peaceful protest.
Ian Crane, thank you very much indeed for joining us live here on RT UK.